From CGTN headquarters in Beijing, this is The Hub with Wang Guan.
Hello and welcome to The Hub. I'm Qinduo, sitting in today for Wang Guan. Chinese President Xi Jinping has addressed in the BRICS leaders meeting via video link, where leaders held in-depth discussions on a wide range of global challenges, ranging from economic governance to international security and sustainable development. These talks come at a time of heightened geopolitical tensions and deep economic uncertainties. So what messages does the summit send to the international community? How is BRICS reshaping its role in global governance? And what path might this grouping pursue in the years ahead? To help us unpack these questions and examine the wider implications of the summit, we are joined by, in Rio de Janeiro, Marina Moreno de Farias, MA International Political Economy, Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. In Moscow, Sleboda, International Relations and Security Analyst. In Suzhou, Gong, Professor of Economics at the University of International Business and Economics. And in our Beijing studio, Liu Baocheng, Dean of the Center for International Business Ethics at the University of International Business and Economics. Welcome to all of you. We'll start with Marina. This meeting was described as an emergency one called on by Brazil. So tell us, what's the major message out of this summit?
So I would like to comment first on the fact that there is a deep need for the reduction on the reliance on the US dollar, especially right now when Brazil, India, and also China are facing severe tariffs and other protectionist measurements from the United States. The reduction on the reliance on the US dollar has been a talking point ever since the start of Lula's third term in Brazil. But things have definitely shifted after Donald Trump's election, meaning there has been an eroding trust in the US dollar and concerns over US fiscal mismanagement, mounting debt, and unilateral sanctions that have been diminishing global confidence on the US dollar as the ultimate reserve currency of the international financial system. I should point out the tariff pressures, especially harsh in the case of Brazil, with a number of 50% on Brazilian exports and very punitive tariff on Indian goods, which have been heightening friction, reinforcing BRICS' urgency to diversify away from dollar dependence. So I would say there have been significant concrete steps taken ever since the summit in July that happened in Brazil, the BRICS Summit. I can highlight the formal approval for a guarantee mechanism through the new development bank, with expected activation of pilot programs in 2026, a technical roadmap for cross-border payments and settlement systems, with Brazil taking leadership in launching the next stage of the BRICS Pay, and stronger commitments into conducting transactions in local currencies and developing interoperable financial platforms.
Right. Let's have John Gong, Professor Gong. Marina mentioned some of the challenges, obviously. And how do you describe this background of this meeting? Marina mentioned some of them, for example, tariffs. And I think if you look at these responses from the member countries, of course, there's conflicts ongoing. Of course, this UN Security Council somehow it's like a paralysis state. It's not functioning that well, etc. How do you characterize the current, the global system, the state of global system, let's say, or the background of this meeting?
Yeah, well, I think there are practical imperatives for taking more actions within the BRICS framework. But I think more importantly, as you pointed out, is the broader context against which the international relations of many countries are moving towards. I think there are two things to highlight. One, of course, is Washington's very seismic change in its foreign policy. Clearly, President Trump's foreign policy is not so much centered on upholding the multilateralism. It's essentially abandoning its leadership role in what we describe, what we usually call as the rules-based international order. He has made withdrawals from several important international organizations. He has basically rendered the WTO, which is the most important organization for global business, global commerce, as part of the rules-based order. Countries like China, countries like Brazil, and other global South countries need to really take some actions. So I would say there's a more strategic imperative here, in addition to the practical need to address the currency issue, the trade settlement issue, and all those things. These are very important. Don't take me wrong on this. Nevertheless, I think we are entering into a new era, essentially, a totally new world, and there got to be a system in place to govern this new world.
All right, Baocheng, a new era, a new world. During the summit, President Xi Jinping said that, quote, countries cannot thrive without an international environment of open cooperation, and no country can afford to retreat to self-imposed isolation, end quote. What's your understanding of this message here? It seems like the presidency is basically saying that, yes, cooperation between BRICS countries, global South countries, but also probably, cooperation with, with European countries, with the U.S. remains equally important, even more important in the more developed economies, developed markets there. So it's open cooperation, open market there?
I do very much agree that countries may be able to survive without working with other countries, but they cannot thrive because in a modern age, people can no longer live from hand to mouth on their own soil. And now when the supply chain is so sophisticated, simply by making a washing machine to making a Boeing airplane, you need really a global supply chain network, and from the very basic resource like rare earths, and to the high developed chips, and also to the entire distribution channel. So there, even when you are making Hollywood movies without really looking at the global marketplace, you simply turn out to be a loser. Nobody's going to put up any investment into any type of program like that. So living in a cocoon means simply say goodbye to my better life for this whole world. And now such a remark is produced in such a critical juncture when many countries are turning more on the right wing and also getting more of unilateralism and protectionism. And now many of the tangible interests, even for those protectionist countries, are being hurt. So he's really sending very much a warning sign to such a sort of ongoing threat, not to mention about the geopolitical confrontation that is still going on in many parts of the world. And also he's also reminding that where is China standing? So China is now getting so much engaged with any part of the world in terms of trade, investment, technological cooperation. And we may have very different political ideas, but it doesn't really prevent us from working together to really to shape a better life for the industry, for climate, and also more importantly for the people of each that are really involved in a multi-holder approach.
Right. Well, Mark, remember the Kazan Declaration adopted last year's BRICS Summit, it mentioned part of the content is to improve global governance, reform global governance. At the recent SCO Summit in Tianjin, in China, Chinese President Xi Jinping introduced the idea of a global governance initiative, stressing the importance of sovereign equality and the international rule of law, genuine multilateralism, etc. So do you see, now it's a time to, obviously, to do something, changes, improve the global governance here?
Yeah, I don't really see that has any concrete immediate effect behind a rhetorical flourish, right? The world is quickly devolving into two geopolitical blocks. The fact that one of those geopolitical blocks doesn't want to be a geopolitical bloc and doesn't recognize itself is irrelevant to the other geopolitical bloc, which has stated that you are either with us or against us. In that kind of climate, there can't be improved global governance, certainly not cooperation across the side of those two geopolitical blocs. And it makes, of course, even global governance within one side. What the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and BRICS are doing in pursuit of that, it is a very slow process. It is the construction of an entirely new global financial and economic architecture to where that fairer vision of global governance might take place. But it is still in its extremely nascent and early stages. Meanwhile, most of world trade still consists, with the U.S., maybe by some measures, China is a larger global economy now, but the U.S. is certainly still the world's largest consumer of foreign exports. And that is still the nature of the game. The Trump administration has decided that the rules, right, the system and the rules of the global trade and the global financial architecture that it created from Bretton Woods on up no longer suit the U.S. and is intending to upend the entire system and unilaterally declare new rules of the game for global trade. Global governance really becomes very tempestuous in such a situation. The best, as our Brazilian colleague already presented before, the single best and most real, concrete effort towards global governance is the new SDO Development Bank, which will run parallel in many measures to the BRICS new development bank.
Mark, you mentioned about the changes, of course, like the U.S. idea of what kind of a world they want to have. But at the same time, they also admit there's this multilateral, a multipolar world we are in. Even, senior U.S. officials also admit that. But what kind of a multipolar world, the concept of a multipolarization in their minds?
Yeah, I'm not so sure that we're actually living in a multipolar world yet. I think that is a terminology that is an aspirational terminology. But I'm not sure that that has actually come to fruition yet, because a separate pole indicates that it has an independent foreign policy and exertion of policy on the rest of the world. I see the world moving rather from it is moving from a unipolar system, but unfortunately it's moving back towards a bipolar system, right? Russia largely does not have a foreign policy that is independent and contradicts in many ways to China, and vice versa. India might be one example that has the potential to form an independent pole, but U.S. pressure, punishment, and attempted punishment of Russia by going after India is pushing India back into the arms of Russia and China. These aren't independent poles. This is a two-block formation. This is a bipolar system, not a multipolar system. The aspiration might be a multipolar system, but if the hegemon doesn't agree to that, it becomes difficult.
It becomes difficult. But of course, we have this, if you take a look at the ideas among the BRICS countries, there are a lot in common. Maria, for example, of course, there's connectivity for the BRICS countries, development for BRICS countries. This sort of, align very well with the Chinese initiative, Belt and Road, focus on connectivity. What do you see there, the potential, for such an idea for like these BRICS countries to get better connected, and of course that facilitate, trade and investment? Hello, Marina.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Yeah. Can you repeat your question? Because
basically this is the BRI initiative and, of course, the global connectivity among SCO countries and common development here.
Yeah, I would say that there has been a solidification of the Global South as a grouping of emerging economies to a more multipolar, South-centered, multilateral platform. I think what the main opinions here, according to the colleagues, is much more negative on the side that they understand these developments as much more on the narrative spectrum and less on the alternatives, the concrete alternatives to the bipolar or unipolar system that has been in place since the Bretton Woods institutions. But I do think that the expansion of the membership of the BRICS, including countries like Egypt, like Indonesia, was a tangible sign of inclusion and representation. I think that BRICS has started paving the way for Global South priorities through its declarations on climate finance, public health, reindustrialization, especially, for example, in the case of Brazil, where we are currently experiencing a reprimarization of our exports. And I think when we're talking about the Belt and Road Initiative, we have to also remember that there is a financial branch or a financial arm to support the Belt and Road Initiative. And within Asia, that's much more easily done than throughout the rest of the Global South. But I do think that BRICS Pay, the New Development Bank, and all the mechanisms that have been coming into fruition in terms of making sure that we are no longer relying only on the US dollar, because for initiatives such as the Belt and Road Initiative, you do need easier, less expensive, less costly ways to do trade and to do investment, public and private. So when you reduce the dependence on the US dollar, what you are also doing is you're making sure that these investments, especially in developing nations, sometimes nations that don't even have their own airports, that don't even have electricity, especially, for example, in the case of Africa, where China has recently boosted their investments, although Europe and the United States have been doing the same thing for a long time. But the thing is, you make sure that these public and private investments are carried out in a much less costly way when you reduce the reliance on the US dollar. And I do think that by embedding the Southern concerns in high-level agenda items, so we were talking, for example, about the reform of the global governance.
Yes.
This, even if it's on more on the narrative spectrum, it also changes the idea of how people see those countries, of how the geopolitical chessboard is seen on the outside. Because I don't think that the hegemon has to agree in order for the correlation of forces in the international scenario to change. I think what is happening right now, and for example, with the parade that just happened in China, what we have seen is that there is a bigger space for these countries within these initiatives to kind of question the authority and the everlasting presence of the United States as the hegemon in the political chessboard.
Right.
So yes, we do have geopolitical friction. We have internal diversity within the BRICS, but I think that these initiatives, especially if they're correlated.
Yeah, Marina, I think Mark also mentioned, this development bank, not only new development bank, but also like a, SU development bank. People are trying to seek, what we can do within the BRICS grouping to coordinate, to cooperate, so as to improve their economic resilience and also improve their economic autonomy, to rely less on the probably, say, the outside market, to improve their ability to deal with external threats.
Yeah. Well, talking about BRICS, how to define it, whether it's organization, whether it's based on a certain treaty, it seems to be incidental, based on the acronyms developed by an economist. So, but history has proven that this is really the right type of incident, because over the last 2 decades since its inception, the world has experienced such a sort of big convergence in which the collaboration between those big emerging economies turned out to be very important to show up the global economic growth pattern. And now, finance is really the bottleneck because, all these big emerging economies require a big infrastructure development, which, without the sizable capital, it is simply a non-starter. So therefore, NEB was born. And the New Development Bank, so far, they have exercised their very strong muscle by $3,050 billion US dollars in multilateral investments, and also by leveraging the private capital together, engaging the established global financial institutions. They've been doing a great job. So far, I haven't seen a single complaint over the project they have really financed in terms of the level of success, in terms of the green development, and also sustainability. So these are really very much commendable. And before, when I talk with some of the my counterparts in Europe, in North America, they do not think that NDB could really do such a wonderful job.
Right.
And so now, by doing that, they, I think another very important step is there to build the investment guarantee program that is based on the model of multilateral investment guarantee agenda by the World Bank. And this is there to alleviate much of the concerns of global investors, particularly from the private sector. Of
what does that mean in investment guarantee here?
Investment guarantee is that it is more of a guarantee against the political risk, because there's vast amount of money that is available, but they hesitate in many cases to engage in very large and also long generation projects in certain developing countries, and simply because the change of government regime, the social commotions, sometimes even civil war, etc., that can really frighten them away. So these political risks are now, with the leverage fund from the New Development Bank, is something that is there to answer them. And this is important because, the World Bank system used to be, operating between the developed world versus the developing world. And also, the political risk insurance program that was conducted in the United States or in Great Britain was really to ensure their own investors that are stretching their arms on those developing countries. But now, developing countries, with the platform of the BRICS Summit, with the platform of the New Development Bank, they are doing it on their own. And this is really to inspire them to, each of the government that is informed, to ensure that they will keep the political risk under control and give the right type of assurance to global investment.
So there will be more investment.
Definitely.
And easier.
Yeah.
John, if you look at the BRICS countries, of course, it includes, these major emerging economies and a number of countries from the global south. How do you see their, what's the common ground in terms of making good use of their potential to work together to make them, say, more resilient against the risks from outside?
Well, I think there are both economic as well as political reasons why these 5 countries are organized together. And plus, there's a round of expansion, a couple of rounds of expansion. Now we have more countries being member states of the BRICS system. I think overall it represents the global south. They are all, pretty much developing countries. And, I think it's, in recent years, I think the organization is clearly moving towards a direction that has seen more substance, that has seen more activities in the economic domain. The currency, synthetic currency initiative is a very significant step. And there are also, at least from Beijing's perspective, there are also cooperation projects being announced, over the years, and these things definitely help bonding the member states as well as other developing countries. And and you look at the new development bank, which has a real substance in it. It's a real organization aspiring to be the developing world's World Bank. So I think all these developments shows that the BRICS is more than just a place for talking heads, for making statements, for making advocacy. I think it's an organization that has real substance behind it. There are various achievements being conducted within this framework. And ultimately, it boils down to a voice, essentially a voice on par with the G7, let's say, right? I think, and every time we think about BRICS, what is its counterpart? It's more likely we're really thinking about G7. G7 represents the most important countries in the developed world, whereas BRICS represents the most important countries in the developing world. There are noticeable differences between the two organizations. Rhetorically, both all claim to be adhering to the rules-based international order. But I think in President Xi's speech, he talked about sovereign equality. I think this is absolutely lacking under the G7 framework. Sovereign equality means that all countries, regardless of their size, regardless of their geographic location, they should be all equal. And they all should be working together, partnering together under the UN system. So I think these are noticeable differences. But after all, I think the world is a much better world with an organization like this representing a vast number of population and economy.
Okay. Well, thank you, John. Thank you all. That's all we have time for. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned as our programs continue on CGTN. Bye and take care.